Welcome back to the AI Ripple Effect podcast, everybody. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Charlie Mann, who is the Chief Hardware Officer for RailState. So welcome to the podcast, Charlie.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. So why don't we start by you giving us a bit about yourself and what RailState does and who your typical customers are?
All right. Most of my career has been as a consultant to companies in the energy industry, doing a variety of market analysis and forecasting for them and assisting them in regulatory matters. And I got pulled into real estate. Part of that was in the coal industry. So transportation is central to that, and it's something I've been interested in and worked in. And an old friend of mine has spent most of his career in the transportation area and founded RailState and asked me to come in to help get the hardware side of it going. So RailState was started because the information that the railroads have about what's going on in their systems, the flows of traffic, where they're having operational problems that they use for their management, they don't share with the customers. There's a very limited ability for customers to see what's going on. And RailState was created to provide a completely independent source of that kind of information in a way that where for the highway system, for ships on the sea, for airplanes in the air, there is public information that lets the users of the system have a sense of what's going on.
Sure.
There's a cloak of secrecy, what's going on in the rail operations.
Interesting. And who are your typical customers for the RailState data, I guess? Is that the analytics that you provide?
Well, our founding customers were in Canada, and our most extensive coverage is still in Canada. And those included a couple of commercial customers and the Canadian Transportation Agency,
Right.
Transport Canada. The commercial customers, and one that's quite interesting, is a very large shipper of minerals going into the export market through the port of Vancouver and the port of Prince Rupert up on the west coast of Canada, where they have, because of investments they made, they have some flexibility in how they move the coal where it goes. But they find that sometimes there are difficulties of getting into the port because of congestion caused by other people's traffic. So their interest, and they really helped financially to get RailState going, was to have enough information about the system so that they could know which port to use, anticipate the amount of delays, help them in scheduling the vessels, know how best to manage inventory at the port and at the mine.
Sure.
It's really operational kinds of things, as well as in their interaction with the railroad. Transport Canada is a broader public responsibility to understand what the service quality and limitations of service are across the whole of Canada.
Right. Interesting. And that sort of information that regarding when the freight is arriving into a port, do they need the whole journey data, or is it just as it's approaching the port so that they can then understand the just-in-time redistribution of that freight? Is that their use case?
It's particularly important for them to know what's going on in the port, but they have the ability, which is typical of all shippers, to track their own shipments.
Right.
There's a system that the railroads have installed of monitors scattered across the country, and the shippers have access to the data from those for their own shipments. It's not new technology, but it works reasonably well. But it's as if all you knew was what was happening to your car on the road and you couldn't see anybody else's. So if they happen to have a train coming into the port, fine. If they're heading for the port and they don't know what the situation is on the port, that's where we can fill a gap. If they find that their train is delayed and they don't know in an intermediate point, for example, there's a rail yard that's, let's say, a day's travel east of Vancouver, where it's pretty frequent that things get delayed and messed up. Having some warning about that and seeing what's happening not only to their traffic, but to everybody's traffic helps them in the management.
Interesting. And the devices that you use to gather that data, or that you develop to gather that data, they're distributed across, I guess, and it's quite a big space, I would imagine.
Right.
How do you manage that inventory of devices and reliability, especially in the harsh winters, maybe in North America? It must be tough.
It's challenging. We have devices from north of Edmonton, and that's pretty darn cold,
I would imagine.
all the way to the Mexican border, and including in one of the hottest parts of the North America and near the Arizona-California border. So we have coolers in the desert. We've designed the devices to be pretty resistant to extremes of temperature. And I wouldn't say that we don't have any problems, but it's pretty reliable. There are about 250 sensors in operation now, about two-thirds of them in Canada, about one-third in the United States. And we're sort of working our way, for example, from the West Coast in toward the middle of the United States. And we have coast-to-coast coverage in Canada. And the devices, we install them off the railroad right away. They're some distance from the track. So there's some tricks. We have a couple of guys who know how to find the sites, convince the site owners to let us put our sensor on their building. So there are some tricks to that.
Really interesting. And although you are focused on the rail aspect of logistics, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on what you're seeing industry trend-wise within that rail element, but also if you have a perspective on the wider logistics industry, what are the trends you're observing in that space?
So there's a lot going on in information for the logistics industry, and a tremendous amount of progress has been made on the trucking side, various things. There's good information about the ports and what happens there. Again, the railroads have a lot of information, but they don't share it. Some of the shippers have installed GPS units on their rail cars. That's expensive. It's a fairly maintenance intensive kind of thing. And again, it gives them a picture for their own cars. There's a lot of interest in the logistics area in trying to integrate all the information and to integrate the whole financial management side of it, all of the things that there's still stuff moving by email and even faxes maybe because there are, there's this huge amount of records and trying to integrate all of that. There's a whole set of companies, and some of those companies I think will end up being partners of RailState, and we're talking to some of them. They're trying to do things like improve the ETAs of shipments, both on the trucking side and on the rail side, where we can help a lot on the rail side. The railroads have an effort to try to, which is really oriented toward the GPS technology. They may get there, but the railroad sense of fast and the rest of the world's sense of fast are not the same.
Sure. It's, it's interesting that you talk about GPS and that technology, but you're using, is it computer vision for your insights? Is that, or is it just imagery itself?
Most of our sensors start just with the camera imagery.
Right.
Now that's where the AI comes in, because we're starting with an image and it's a fairly decent resolution image, and we'll pick up in extreme weather, very high snowfall or fog, we lose some images. A very, very high percentage, we can get a good image. And then, all right, what is that? What can we take? Well, we can read the locomotive and the car numbers. Every car's got a distinct number, and there's a public file and we can use to check that. That helps. We can read every car, primarily tank cars, that carries hazardous material, has a diamond-shaped placard on it that's, like so, with a standard number that tells you what the material is, which could be anything from diesel fuel to hydrochloric acid or whatever. And we can read those. Okay, now we can read the numbers on the containers. We don't get them all, but we get enough to get a pretty good picture. We identify the type of the cars. That's a totally different, the AI for reading a number and the AI for recognizing a tank car is a totally different problem. But we do both of those things. And then you got to take all those and you got to put it all together to get a complete image of a train. And then you got to take that information and say, okay, we saw that train at 2 in the morning heading westbound of Edmonton. And we think the same train just passed through let's say, a day or so east of Vancouver. Yep, we can match it. It's the same train.
Right. And you, obviously you have a heavy AI usage in your platform itself and interpreting those images. And I guess you predict as well as part of that once the data is aggregated and you process that. But what about internally? I mean, I know you're quite an agile small company, but Do you use AI in any way to optimize your operational side of things, sort of back office elements, or is it mostly around the product? Or,
It's around the processing of the images, and we've done just a little bit of exploring whether we can use it in a predictive way with the data.
right.
Haven't gotten very far with that, but it's obviously very interesting, and that's something that we've talked to customers about doing.
Sure.
So back to your question, there are a couple of applications where we supplement the camera with a sensor that's the same RFID based technology that the
Right.
railroads use. We can only do that inside a plant gate because there we don't have any issue with being able to put a sensor right close to the tracks. And that gives us redundancy and a high reliability in reading the car numbers. And that's information for a very different kind of purpose that's interesting. There is a strong interest, for example, companies in the chemical industry, in knowing every car that came in, the correct car number with the order, the condition of the car, which we can see from the images. Is there any damage to the car? Is it got the label on it? Is it within the required inspection period and so forth? So that's information that we do at the plant gate.
Right. Interesting. And obviously, there is almost a clash of technologies because you have the very physical railroad, transportation of goods, and then your high technological devices that you have positioned everywhere. Are there any challenges you've come across in trying to modernize this seemingly historically manual process?
Manual process in the sense of
Sorry, physical rather than
well, obviously the computer vision is an automatic process.
sure.
And to contrast it with the manual process, it is quite common that at a plant that loads by rail, that they have a guy out with a sort of a clipboard or something like that, taking down the car numbers of the cars that the railroad just got dropped off. Well, that's something we can automate.
Yeah, you can imagine. Great. And for RailState and your up and coming plans for growth, what are the key milestones for the company, say, over the next 12 months?
Expanding the network, which we're doing steadily, improving our predictive abilities to help customers develop better ETAs. And there's a continuing series of challenges on the computer vision AI side. For example, the containers, which is very, very interesting data. The format of the numbers on the containers is not as uniform. The physical condition of the lettering is not as consistent or as good. So simply working on the computer vision side and being able to increase our accuracy in the percentage of those numbers that we can read. Okay, that's an example. We have, and I'm not even sure I want to be specific about that, but we have a third kind of sensor that we actually have all deployed that we're starting to use to help us in identifying which track the train is on and in making sure our counts and of the cars are accurate,
Right.
even in adverse weather. So there's plenty of room for continuing technical creativity. So there's some tough problems.
Interesting. And how do you navigate? Yeah, I assume you have to get a permit to put one of these devices on. Oh, okay.
No, we are off. We are on private property. We are not on the railroad right away. The device is, if you went looking for them and you knew exactly where you look, you would find it, but it's not conspicuous.
Right, right.
It doesn't make a noise or flash a light or anything like that.
Interesting. Okay. So I know, especially with the AI technology advancements that we've seen recently, is quite a short period of time. But if, say, you had, with the hindsight that you've got today, and if you had a time machine, would there be something different, Charlie, that you would do, both technology or how you're approaching growth of the business, if you're able to go back 12 months?
I think that some of the software development that we've done would be significantly accelerated.
Right.
Because what we've got is a mixture, and the AI, the machine learning part of it, is the computer vision, and even there have been improvements in speeding things up. We start with public source models, and then they have been extensively customized. And I don't know enough about the details of that side to say how much, but I know on the other side, where there's a lot of algorithm development that does all different kinds of things with the data, that doing that today would be faster than when we started 5 years ago.
Very good point. Interesting. And for those people out there who are interested in looking up RailState and the services you provide, where can they get that information, Charlie?
Well, you can look at our website, which is railstate.com, and that'll give you a little bit of an overview. And there's contact information there. Uh, and we'd be happy to, which I'll show you at some point if you're curious,
Yeah, 100%.
a demonstration of what our system looks like and the user interface, because we interact with our customers in two different ways, some of them with both. Through a user interface that has really some pretty powerful tools that they can use to access the data and see it in graphic form.
Right.
And then many of them also set up an API and download the data and integrate it into their own systems in that way.
Sure. And I guess you guys are on LinkedIn. You have a page there as well that people can find you
Yeah,
on.
right. We do.
Okay, brilliant. Well, listen, I'll make sure that I include those links into the description of this podcast so that everybody out there who's interested can find more out
Thank you.
about you. And really appreciate your insights, Charlie. Sounds fascinating and amazing how you can deploy these things all over various weather, temperature, and other conditions. So really interesting. And thank you to everybody for joining today. And we will see you in the next episode of the AI Ripple Effect podcast. Charlie, thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure talking with you.